Hi, my name is Rod Page, and I want to talk to you a little bit about Wikidata and the bibliography of life, and give you a bit of a context of why taxonomists care about bibliographic data and citation data. Okay, so I want to start by giving you some context. This is some work by DeSolder Price in the 60s, who worked on citation patterns and what they could tell you about a particular field. And one key idea is the idea of a research front. So what you're seeing here is a graph plotting for each paper, the data was published and the date that each paper it cites was published. And the idea was for a field that's really hot, you tend to get papers published rapidly and they cite only the most recent literature. A good example of this would be, say, the COVID-19 literature right now. So you get this kind of notion of a research front. Every so often, people might pause for breath and say, okay, let's review the situation, and they'll go back and look at all the previous papers, and you'll see something you can see here. This vertical line is a review paper. And of course, fields have, their citation classics. This is a paper that everybody's got to cite, and that gives you a pattern a bit like that. Now, if you do this sort of analysis for taxonomy, you get quite a different pattern. So the pattern you get in taxonomy looks like this. Essentially, what you're seeing here is the lower triangle is almost completely filled in, and that's because pretty much every paper, no matter how recently it's published, cites the older literature. None of these papers ever die. They're always potentially relevant. And so you can see that taxonomy would care about that literature, but also the citation patterns between those papers. Now, this is something which has more than just academic interest. So let me just get out of your way here so you can see this chart. So this is the journal Zootaxer. It is the largest journal in our field. It publishes thousands of papers each year. And most of the new species of animals that are discovered are described in this journal. And you can see in this chart here, look, it's just massively greater in importance than any other journal. Now, much to the horror of taxonomy, a couple of months ago, Web of Science decided to take away the impact factor for this journal. And here's a tweet by Wayne Madison suppressing surprise and outrage about that. Now, there's a number of issues going on here. One is, how on earth did we give a private company so much power over an academic field? But the other issue is that the data used here, which is citation patterns between articles published in Zootaxer, is not freely available. So it's very hard for us to argue the case for the importance of this journal without that data being open. Now, part of the problem here is the way the journal itself is published. So Zootaxer it's a modern journal, and the articles all have DOIs. So you'd think that the tools that we normally use to publish citation data and say get it into sources like Wikidata, we could use them. But what you can see here is that this is a list of articles cited by one particular Zootaxer paper. Many of them do not have DOIs. The only ones that do here are shown here with these arrows. So much of the taxonomic literature is almost invisible in that it doesn't have DOIs. To make things slightly worse, when Zootaxer sends its information to Crossref and uploads a DOI, that information looks like this, and you can see here the reference count you can see there is 0. So Zootaxer doesn't send even the list of DOIs that it cites to Crossref. So getting open data for this journal is very difficult. So what I'd like to sort of do is just, given that background, just very quickly summarize a couple of things that I'm doing in this area. So the first is to try and populate Wikidata with lots of references that are relevant to taxonomy. And that's this project you can see here. There are existing tools for taking DOIs and uploading information to Crossref, and they're great, but that doesn't include all those articles that don't have DOIs or aren't in PubMed. So I've written some code to do that. The second thing I'm interested in doing is this little project here, and you can see a screenshot over here. Wikidata is wonderful, but it's not particularly easy to visualize information in it. So I wrote a little app that displays information on people and journals and publications in a fairly simple and kind of straightforward sort of way. It's not as flash as Scholia, but it gives you a sense of what's available. And the final thing I want to touch on, I talked quite a bit about Zootaxer. and the lack of data that we have. To try and sort of make progress on that, I've scraped the journal and loaded hundreds of thousands of citation strings. That's as far as I've got. If anybody's looking for a challenge, I've put that information you can see here in a data set on Figshare. That's free to anybody who wants to go and have a play. So I hope I've given you a quick overview of why open bibliographic data and open citation data is of interest to those of us who work in the field of taxonomy. Thanks very much for your time.